So, do UFOs exist? Do aliens exist? Do mythical monsters exist? And do ghosts exist? This is all a very interesting question, and I think we can sort of combine every single one here into one question. All these things that we cannot prove. Are we ever going to prove that they do exist? Are we missing something that does prove they exist? We're going to look into the deeper aspects of UFOs, and do they exist? Have we already seen it? Could we prove that certain sightings are not fake? Let's have a look at one in particular, and we're going to go to January 2017, where we look at the Gosport sightings. That is not far from me. Now, most daytime sightings are really, really easy to debunk. There was one in South America where someone saw 3 dots in the sky, and they all merged together and started morphing into a different shape, and then disappeared out into the distance. And actually, the television got hold of it, and eventually they managed to find out that the local air display unit had actually been flying, and that was most likely, remember, 3 of their aerobatic planes coming together and moving off into the distance. Of course, a triangular formation is quite regular with these guys, so you would expect them to be far apart, moving together, and then showing how good they are at flying. So in the daytime, it can be quite easy, and sometimes you get daytime ones that are completely fabricated. Such as I remember the one back in the day, 70s, 80s, where somebody had used a hubcap and thrown it and took a picture of the hubcap. And of course, you're thinking, it looks like a UFO. It is, isn't it? But of course, you're seeing what you want to see, and that is all it is. But we do have to think about pareidolia, and we do have to think how much of it is us wanting to see. We have to think about the Loch Ness Monster. I said we could bring it in. Loch Ness Monster apparently was an elephant. And a local circus had indeed put their elephant into the loch to let it wash off. It was a lot easier, and it did actually go under and lift its trunk over above the water. But because there were so many films around at that time that showed monsters and sea monsters, they immediately started to resurrect this idea of a sea monster in Loch Ness, and Loch Ness Monster was reinvigorated thanks to that, and thanks to the films. It was all pareidolia, and I remember somebody floating a 6-inch stick out just past some American tourists, and then they all came back to the coach saying they'd seen the Loch Ness Monster, and drew this stick with a head on it, and they'd floated it not too far away from them, but because of the distance and they couldn't see the piece of wood it was floating on, they thought it was the Loch Ness Monster further out than what it looked. So it's very important that we think about the pareidolia aspect of it, because things like that, where we've actually tested people, it really does prove it does exist, and our minds can create some really weird and wonderful pictures, because we expect them to do certain things or to look like certain objects, like the sausages that we see flying in the sky. We see certain shapes of UFO. Why do we see certain shapes? Well, quite often it's because that's what we expect to see. And I remember going to a ghost hunt down close to me, and one person says he sees something. Everybody else is saying they see the same thing. Everybody's seeing the same thing. Is one of those cases where the people say, that has to be something real, something important, because one person seeing it could be just pareidolia, but surely several is a proof it did happen. Well, unfortunately not. we can trick our brains, we can trick other people's brains into thinking, yeah, I remember that film with it's the sausage, yeah, I can just make it out, and it isn't, it's a bird, but everybody thinks it's the same shape because they're told that's what I believe it is. So we've got to think about the pareidolia as well. Really, really important. So let's finally go into Gosport, and we show you the one or two of the images up there, please. Thank you. And as you see, it starts off quite far. The three lights. You can only see two at first, and then all of a sudden it morphs into three, and it looks like it's a triangle turning round. Well, we've seen these triangles turning around all over the globe, haven't we? And surely, if we're reporting that, we could just be doing it pareidolia. But this person's got a video of it, so it can't be pareidolia, can it? Well, no. Unless he's seeing something else, and he's immediately thinking, that is just like the others. It is it's a spaceship. It's a UFO, and actually it's something else. Like the guy in South America that saw those three dots merge and disappear. It was the local red arrows, if you like, flying at a local display. So how do we try and if we look at the last picture there, how they actually came together as a triangular dot in the distance. Now, how do we look at that, and how do we think we could debunk it? And that's the important thing. It's, can we debunk it? Because most of the time it is actually not what you think. What we've got to really think about here is that several people saw this. One person videoed it. I think someone else took a picture. At least one person took a picture of it as well. So we did have identification on more than one front. So it did go into the paper, for instance, locally. So we sort of think, right, okay, it's doing what we expect. We're told that UFOs do. UFOs tend to appear over military bases and military installations, and there is one right next to Gosport. It's called Portsmouth Harbour. So we can't get any more military than that. It's one of England's main bases. So already we're building that pareidolia up, aren't we? We're building the fact that we'd expect to see one over Portsmouth because it's a big base, and surely if a UFO is going to happen, it's going to happen over our big base right next to us. And if we see anything, it's going to be a UFO because we've got our base next to us. So we've got to think about that, because believe it or not, the brain is really powerful, and it will think that, even if we don't believe with the front of our brain that it is thinking that, the back of your brain is whizzing away thinking, oh yes, story, I remember that story in America, and the story in Europe, and stories in England. Oh yeah, it's gonna be a UFO. It's over the base in Port. No, we've got to be very, very meticulous here, and we've got to think: do UFOs exist? Does this prove they exist, or doesn't it? Good question. Write your comments down below. Like and subscribe, and we'll continue. Let's quickly think about the red arrows. Very good point, because the red arrows do actually fly at night. It's part of their training to be able to fly in all conditions. Although, as we know, if it gets really bad conditions, they tend not to fly, because it can get too dangerous with low cloud. However, nighttime flying is part of what they do. However, in this case, they're actually based up in where I was born, further up north of England. So they're hundreds of miles away. They wouldn't be flying over Portsmouth unless they were based down here for a quick morning event somewhere locally where they had to do a flyby. Now you have to think that perhaps it could have been some form of aerial display, these lights do seem to turn around, just like we see on various UFO videos on the television. Very much 3 lights turning around like that, and occasionally one of them disappears behind something. Well, is it something, or are they just disappearing behind each other, much like the South American one I mentioned? Did it just disappear behind one of the other planes? Because obviously there are plane lights. They're going to be having some form of lighting in there. And remember, jets. Perhaps we can see more than just the lights from the plane. But unfortunately, this is a very granular image, and we can't really see any flashing lights that would be on the wings. And we would be able, though, to look on ADSB and find out whether they were around. So we can have a look at that, and we can see and find out whether they were. So we can look at things like that, and indeed they weren't around Gosport at that point in time. Otherwise, it would have been a very good reason, because you could see that triangle disappear into the distance and get smaller and smaller, and 3 planes, 4 planes, whatever, making that group of triangular formation into the distance would probably make that image. And if the moon, it was a clear night. Remember that it was a clear night, and the moon shining on something quite nice and reflective would indeed suddenly catch the eye quite nicely. So it would have been a good debunk, but they weren't around. So what else can be up there that's flying around? Well, we do have secret UK bases up there on the hill that people aren't supposed to know about. So what is I hope the channel stays up. What is the likelihood that they've got something? Well, actually, they don't do that sort of thing up there, so it's not them either. So we've got to think about everything. And actually, my theory on this is we can't actually debunk it, because the things that it could be, we know it wasn't. You can check it out on the ADSB site. They certainly weren't flying around at that point in time. The local papers and radio covered it and said no, there was nobody around at the time. There's nothing flying over Portsmouth. They wouldn't allow it. So it was flying over Gosport, which is the next town to the city. So it was seen over the local town, and of course we have to think that is just a little bit odd. We can see the lights of Portsmouth there, and it is possible that some firm company there has balloons in the air, or it could be, it could quite easily be something simple as laser. We have had locally UFOs mentioned before, and it has actually been laser lights hitting the cloud. However, it was a clear evening, so that one's bumped out. So we have to think that it could be something that has been put out by a local company. It could be, and while ever there's a little bit of it could be, we can't prove for definite that the Gosport event was real, because mainly it's at night. So if it was something that the local businesses, companies had got together to do to advertise something, it was really good. But unfortunately, it was at night, and we couldn't see what was happening and what it was from Gosport. So we would immediately see those lights and think, well, it just looks like lights in the distance. So the last thought on that is the fact that it lasted quite a few minutes, and this video does indeed last several minutes. And you're thinking, well, if it was a company out there, they would want it to last several minutes, wouldn't they? They want it to last quite a while, and to move it around and make sure people saw it. So whenever we, like I said, whenever we think that there's a very small likelihood, and it really is sort of single figures percentage, isn't it? We can't actually prove it for definite, because it was too dark to see anything, and the only images we've got are quite granulated, and you can see by the look of it, it does actually look like a reflection. And to me, I don't know about you, but you would tell me what you think down below in the comments. The lights just seem a little bit too, whether it's the granulation of it or not, I don't know, but it looks like it's sort of like glistening a little bit, almost like it is the moon bouncing off something in the sky. So again, that adds another what if scenario, doesn't it? So was Gosport proving that UFOs exist? I don't know. And again, I open that one to you, and certainly the people down in Gosport near me. Do you think it was real? Do you think you were just seeing the light glistening off something in the sky? Do you think that it was one object, three objects? What do you think it was? I'd be happy to receive your comments down below, and I'd be happy to do another video on it if you want. It's Mystic John Paranormal, doing paranormal, ghosts, tarot cards, and UFOs. Like and subscribe.